matter when it happens, man, I immediately get that twinge in nerves right at the beginning of every show. Still hasn't gone away. Thousands of shows. And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive, everybody. It is Tuesday, November 26th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by DK. We're brought to you by us, special Black Friday edition. You guys can see the promo code in the top right corner of the screen right now. We'll definitely talk about that as we get moving. 5-game slate. Kind of a weird one. No on-paper blowouts. Highest line that we have is 4.5. This is a very different day than what we normally get. So I want you guys to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both. I almost said me because I'm used to doing my strategy show read. Follow us both on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are below our bodies. DK, what's up?
Not much, man. It's just pretty solid 5-game slate here. And then tomorrow is going to be the big headache, 14 games. But yeah, interesting 5-game slate, good size contest. So ready to break it down.
Yeah, we got a couple weird spots. We have some of the news that we've been waiting on already hashed out. Jordan Poole news already came in. We're waiting on Jalen Green, the Mike Conley one's huge. Jalen Green, Mike Conley, and that's it, I guess.
Yeah, it's really not a big slate for like injury news.
No. I mean, the Conley one will have major ripple effects, depending on how that breaks. But if him and Jalen Green both get ruled in, the only thing that we're probably going to see for the next couple hours is stuff we didn't see coming.
Mm-hmm. So you ready to load up on the Washington Wizards?
Well, considering right now the Wizards and Bulls are making up 310% of the 800% ownership I have on DraftKings, apparently the answer is yes. Disaster incoming. Let's do it. Let's do it. The Chicago Bulls are 4.5-point favorites in Washington, 245 total. Everybody that's normally available for the Bulls is, except for Patrick Williams. He is still out. Lonzo working his way back, though. Doubtful. Supposed to be back soon. So we are seeing a chunk of ownership coming into Chicago. We've got 25 to 30 on Levine on both sites. Kobe White's 10 on FanDuel, 20 on DraftKings. Vooch is in that 20 to 25% range. Desumu's 20 to 30, depending on the site. Giddey's 15 to 20, depending on the site. And then we're getting a little bit more to Buzelis, who's around 5 on DraftKings and 15 on FanDuel. So my question to you is this. We'll start here. Do you have a preferred bull?
I think for me right now, it's Josh Giddey coming in at 6.4. Now, of the main bulls, like he is the guy with probably the widest range of outcomes. We have seen his minutes get slashed before. We've seen him get benched before. But if you do get, the high end of the minutes for Josh Giddey and you get like the 30 to 32 minute game in a spot here against the Wizards at that price point, I just really like the upside on Giddey. So coming in around 20%, I think he stands out as a really solid option there, but can't go wrong with Vooch, Levine, and Ayo. 5.5 for Ayo. The price has come up, but he should play good minutes in this one. Levine and Vooch, reasonable price points there at 7.8 for Levine and 8.2 for Vucevic. And then Kobe White at 7K, getting a little bit less ownership than the guys above him, but still a solid option. So I definitely think you're going to want some Bulls exposure here. Those main 5, I think, all look pretty good. Outside of that, you mentioned Buzelis getting a little bit of ownership. Now, he got extended last game due to the blowout. I don't necessarily trust the minutes on Buzelis, but I mean, if you told me he's playing 20-plus minutes again, then yeah, he would stand out as a really good value. I'm just not 100% confident the minutes will be there. And then you're getting a little bit of love, too, for Jalen Smith, which is fine. There's not a lot of amazing value on the slate. Smith is going to back up Vooch, basically just play whatever Vooch does not play. Good point per minute player, but again, only center eligible. So, I think Giddey probably my preferred option right now, but any of the main 5 bulls, I think, look pretty good today.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat. I'm like in and around the field on really all of these guys. I don't have anybody that immediately jumps out. Like, I do think that Vooch looks the best, but there's like when you look the best as a center only guy, you're just a little bit more muted by default because you're just not able to be placed in the same sort of roster spots as some of these guys that have MPEs. But after that, like I don't have a huge difference between Levine, White, and and Giddey. Like they all are sort of the same guy to me relative to salary, and they're all showing up in my lineups. It's hard to not. I mean, the Wizards' defense is comically horrific. This matchup has the biggest total on the day. It has the highest pace on today. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. It doesn't matter. Today. 30% Levine in my lineups right now, 15 of White, 30 of Vooch, 20 of Desunmu, 15 of Giddey, and then 20 of Buzelis right now at 4K. We're currently projecting him for 6% ownership on DraftKings. I'm fine with that. Like if he were higher owned, I don't think that I'd be getting there. He played 28 minutes last time out. I think he played 20 the game before that. One of which didn't have Torrey Craig, one of which didn't have Julian Phillips. So could he get to 26 plus? Absolutely. We just saw it happen. No reason it couldn't happen here. However, not at all what I'm projecting for. I went 21, just trying to be reasonable, I guess. And at 21, he's showing up as like sort of a contrarian GPP play for me. That works. I don't mind that at all. I'm also I'm fully ready to watch him play 4 minutes, and everybody else that I don't think is playing much for the Bulls ends up doing that. Or they put their pedal to the metal and we see the starters get a much bigger chunk of minutes just because it's an NBA Cup game and they are still alive. Like that is a potential scenario as well, where we see Levine, White, Vooch, Desunmu, Giddey to a degree, just see a bump in minutes, and all of those bench guys play a little bit less. Are you playing that angle in any way?
Yeah, so I wanted to mention that their most recent game is Memphis. So they had played, I think it was 5 games in 7 days. And there was a quote out there about Billy Donovan kind of wanting to limit the minutes a bit for the main guys. So I think in this game, you could definitely see that minutes increase, or at least like the high end of what the main Bulls usually play. Again, you mentioned they are still alive in the in-season tournament. So their most recent game, again, we got that quote before that they were going to kind of limit the guys. I don't think there's going to be any sort of limitations on the main guys here. So yeah, I think you're probably going to see in a competitive game the higher end of what we usually see for the minutes for like those top 5 guys.
Alrighty. I did get one share of Jalen Smith. That could easily go away, but I get why it's happening on a 5-game slate. The path is pretty obvious. Anything's going wrong with Vooch, Jalen Smith is going to pick up a couple extra minutes, and it won't take much at 3,600, especially for somebody that's like a 1.15 to 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy. But I think Chicago's pretty easy to talk about. It's like play the starting 5. They all look pretty good. There's a reason they're all 20 to 25% owned a piece. They all should be. I don't see anything weird with the ownership coming into Chicago. You're getting they have the highest implied total on today's slate. There's a reason we should be getting the Chicago Bulls. I hate that it's the first game of the day because I'm going to be ultra locked in on a slate that has 4 more potential late swap opportunities, but I'm cornering the market on Chicago and not necessarily cornering the market on Washington, but clearly they're in a lot of stuff because the public is cornering the market on Washington. 250% aggregate ownership to the Wizards on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm just going to start us off with the guys that are pulling a ton. And by the way, if you didn't know it, Jordan Poole out for this one, missed the last one as well. Kyle Kuzma's 60% on DraftKings, 40 on FanDuel. Keyshawn George is about 50 on both. Alexander Sarr is 45 on DraftKings, 30 on FanDuel. And then Malcolm Brogdon is 25 on DraftKings, 50 on FanDuel. I'm just going to open it up wide, though. Like, what do you like here from Washington? Because we're obviously about to talk about like 10 different guys.
Yeah, so Wizards are a team that you literally have to have interest in on this slate. Great spot, up-tempo game against the Bulls. You take out Jordan Poole, their highest usage player. There's a lot to like. So in their most recent game without Poole, they ran the starters, Brogdon, Kuzma, Coulibaly, Sarr, and George. And then off the bench, you saw JV play the backup 5, Kispert, and Carrington. You saw like a little bit of run for Gill and Butler, but 5 and 6 minutes each respectively. So expecting a relatively tight rotation here for the Wizards. Now looking at ownership, I agree on the top end that I think Kuzma probably is the easiest guy to get to. 6.3K. I would expect him to play, somewhere in the low 30s minute range, maybe up to about 35. So reasonable price point there on Kuzma. I think he stands out as a really solid option. Now, I do find it interesting that Alexander Sarr is hovering around 50% and JV is about half that ownership. I agree. I think both are good plays, but I think JV is a good pivot if he's going to come in at half the ownership. Now, taking Jordan Poole off the court this year, 121-minute sample size, so it's not like a huge sample, but JV 1.36 fancy point per minute player. So he is a guy that, like, you know, if he picks up a few extra minutes, he could absolutely smash here. And it's not like I'm scared of like Vooch on the defensive end. So no. I'm pretty high on JV. I like him as a pivot to Sarr. Not saying Sarr is a bad play. Played 31 minutes, had a massive game last time out. We've seen the ceiling from him. He's gone for 40 plus in 2 of the last 5 games. I just think the ownership gap is a little bit wide there. You're getting Malcolm Brogdon coming in around 25% ownership. The only downside I'll say with Brogdon is, like, I just don't know how many minutes he can play. So it was a competitive game last time. He only played 25 minutes, 26 the game before. So, like, do we have 30 plus minutes in the range of outcomes for Brogdon? I'm not sure. We haven't seen it yet, right? They've kind of eased him back into it, but, you know, solid last couple games for him, 35, 25 fancy points. And then looking at the rest of the ownership here. So George coming in around 50% and Corey Kispert around 20%. That's another one that kind of stands out to me in tournaments. I don't know if Keyshawn George should be 2x the ownership of Corey Kispert here. In their most recent game, George started, but Kispert actually played more off the bench. Kispert played 36 minutes off the bench close. George played 28 minutes. So I think those two are pretty similar plays. And if you're going to be Kispert at half the ownership, I think I would prefer that. Rounding out ownership is Koulibaly coming in around 20%. He's been playing big minutes, 5.7K. I think he's a pretty safe option. Like, in their most recent game, Koulibaly played 38 minutes. So he stands out as a pretty good point per dollar play. And the last guy really to mention is Bub Carrington, you know, hovering around 5%. The minutes have ticked down on him recently with Brogdon back. But, like, if Carrington plays well off the bench, I would not be surprised if he gets, like, you know, 28 to 30 minutes. It's still possible. So, like, he's a little bit interesting as, like, a dart throw, I guess, in tournaments. But all in all, I think the Wizards are probably your top team to target on the slate. Obviously, there's a lot of ownership coming to them. And, yeah, great spot against the Bulls.
Yeah, we're largely on the same page here. The Kuzma piece to me is the easiest name to click on for Washington. You're seeing it in the ownership. No pool around. The minutes have been coming up for Kuz. The price isn't all that problematic. He's going to be the easiest button click. The first cash game option you're grabbing from Washington is going to be Kyle Kuzma. That stuff all seems pretty easy to me. I do like the Joval shout. He grades out really well to me. I don't know if it's just a situation of, like, where ownership is in relationship to some other guys, but I ended up actually light on him, and I think that he's properly owned at 25%. I did not end up light, though, on Alexander Sarr. He is in 80% of my lineups right now at that crisp 45 mark. Definitely scares me. It is a big stand. The path to him not being on the floor as much and Joval picking up like 2 or 3 more minutes is very clean in this sort of spot. That could happen that can happen quite easily if Sarr picks up any fouls or anything like that. I'm a little nervous to be as light as I am on Joval for how I have him graded out. So I do like you shouting him out as a potential pivot in a situation where Sarr is definitely pulling a bit more ownership than I think he should relative to Joval. I like that shout. I share every thought process you had for Malcolm Brogdon. He's in 15% of my stuff right now, 25% owned. I'm very nervous about his minutes. I matched the 26 that he has basically played over the past 2. Gives me a little bit of pause for sure. Could play 28, 29, 30. I think it's in the cards. They probably would like that to be the case. Although it is the Wizards. They're not exactly playing for wins, and they have no ability to do anything in the NBA Cup. So they're not exactly playing for point differential or anything good like that. So yeah, Brogdon scares me, but obviously probably the second most talented player on the team. Maybe honestly the best player on the Wizards. Better than Kuzma for sure, but not in a DFS sense today, at least not to me. The Kispert-George relationship, I was glad you pointed that out. Seeing George be 50% and Kispert be 25 is pretty surprising to me. Kispert has the better positionality because he can cross over to guard and forward. The $200 price difference is essentially meaningless to me. They're basically the same per minute, dude. I have Kispert at 0.8. I have Keyshawn George at 0.85. To see those guys have such a sizable gap in ownership is surprising to me. I don't have it in that sort of gap using like optimal rates or boom rates or anything like that. But I'm also not getting either of these guys. I don't have Kispert. I have one share of George. It is going to be something that I dig into after the show, but I'm thinking that I'm probably going to have some other 4K-ish stands that I'm taking, that I'm getting at much lower ownership than George and potentially lower ownership than Kispert. I'm probably too far away on those guys, but I don't see either one of them as like super appealing if that's where the ownership numbers are. I mean, this game is just inundated with plays. We have some spots in a couple of these future games that don't look nearly as good as what we're talking about here for Chicago and Washington. My only other question for you would be this. Are you planning to treat this game any differently to leave yourself open for swaps, or because of the lack of news, is it just sort of a day where you're kind of just going to take what you're getting?
Yeah, I'm probably just going to take what I'm getting just because there's not a lot of news still out there. It does kind of suck. This is the first game, and this is the game that I'll most likely have the most exposure to. But just with what we know right now, there's only a few other pieces of news that we're waiting for. I think I'm still going to be getting a lot of exposure to it.
All righty. Well, this is I would imagine, the best overall game in terms of ownership. It's not even an imagination. Washington is doubling and then some the second most owned team, and the second most owned team is Chicago. So 370% ownership coming into Washington and Chicago. That means that there's only 430 for all the other 8 teams on this slate. Oof. Oof. We got to hit a super chat here. This is a big one. Skylar Bernard. I'm a huge fan of the stream. Been in the NICU with my firstborn for the past few days, and the streams have lightened the mood and gave me some much needed entertainment. Much love from Nebraska. Now, much love from us, man. That's hopefully, I'm assuming that based on the message that you just sent, that things are okay with your son. I hope that that's the case. So I hope this is sort of the path to him not being in the NICU and you guys getting to take him home and go about your business. But congrats on your firstborn. That's awesome. And I hope everything is getting better for you guys, man. It's good to see that you're watching. It means a lot to us, but we're all pulling for you guys. Hopefully NICU is just precautionary more than anything else. So appreciate you watching. Let's go to game number 2 after we hit the schedule for the rest of the day, which is very easy. 1, in order to get to live before lock, you guys are going to need to hit that like button. 1,200 people, 140 likes. Let's hit that like button for Skylar. I am willing to use that as a mechanism to get some likes for sure. So hit that thumbs up. Let's see how much we can run that number up. And then we got playback tonight. The live before lock will go from 6 to 7, and then Greg and I are hopping on to playback from 7 till 8. We'll be able to talk any sort of news or late swaps between 7 and 7:30. We'll be able to do the same thing again between 7:30 and 8. We'll get Bulls Wizards for the first half hour, which should be great for DFS purposes, terrible for our eyes. And then we'll get Milwaukee and Miami coming up after that one. But we'll be there watching games. If you have a League Pass account, you could link it, watch the games along with us. If you don't, we have 20 VIP passes that we can hand out so you guys can see the game with us. The Milwaukee Bucks are 2.5-point dogs in Miami, 222 total. Second lowest total on the slate. But Milwaukee, this game, Houston, Minnesota, San Antonio, and Utah, all basically the same total. It is the game that I have with the lowest pace, however. And we're kind of seeing that in the ownership. 10% to Giannis is the only person in double digits on DraftKings. 13% to Giannis is the only person in double digits in FanDuel. I am barely getting this team 2 shares of Giannis, a lone share of Dame, a lone share of Taurean Prince right now, which I assume will just wash away as I rerun everything over the next hour and 40 minutes. What in the world do you want to do here with the Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah, so not the best spot here. Like you said, low total. Not a lot of ownership coming in. Giannis right now getting the most love at around 10%. Like if you wanted to get to Giannis or Dame at relatively low ownership at a small slate, totally fine. Both those guys have a pretty high ceiling. I just think it's kind of tough to prioritize them. Couple guys I like at basically no ownership for tournaments. Brook Lopez would be one coming in at 6K. So it's really just a minutes thing for Brook Lopez. He's not, the best point per minute guy as a big, but over the last 4 games, 38 minutes, 33 where he got in foul trouble against the Pacers, 35, and then 40. So like you definitely have, high 30s minutes in the range of outcome for Brook Lopez in a competitive game, assuming no foul trouble. So I think he's an interesting contrarian play. And then Gary Trent Jr. has quietly been better over the last 3 games or so, 28, 29, and 29 minutes over the last 3 games. Coming off the bench, he's relatively scoring dependent, but if he's making his shots, they can leave him in there, right? And they've done it the last 3 games. He's kind of got extended. So on a slate where there's not like a lot of amazing value, I think Gary Trent Jr. is a reasonable contrarian option there, coming in around 2%. So yeah, Trent, Lopez, I think are okay contrarian options. Don't think I'll be getting to Bobby Portis on the slate. I don't think it's necessary to get to like Taurean Prince. Andre Jackson's been starting, but the minutes are not there, and he's not a good point per minute player. So I would say, yeah, Dame, Giannis, fine as contrarian spend ups, and then some interest there in Brolo and Gary Trent.
Yeah, I like the Brolo shout. He's fascinating to me. Those minutes have been up big time. He's 6K now. Now, really just not a good per minute dude. Somewhere in that like 0.8 to 0.85 range. But those minutes being up are appealing. And then you start seeing guys like Vooch, a couple $1,000s more expensive, but 25% owned. And I look at Brook Lopez and it's like, man, if he really is like sub 5% owned, would it be so crazy on a 5-game slate for him to be the dude today? That's not crazy in my head. I have him under owned. Unfortunately, I'm not getting to him. I just assume this game environment is so discounted that I just can't get him into lineups that grade out well enough. But he is somebody that I'm paying attention to, and he's the kind of guy that I would want to like build a chalky lineup and swap to at center if I were building it by hand. Anxious to see if I end up getting to a little bit more, but it's just a really unlikable game. I don't even have. I can't advocate for anything.
Yeah, it's tough to like a lot in this game. It really is. Just with the game that we just talked about, Wizards Bulls, like no defense, and we have some guys out and stuff, and you come to Bucks Heat, like very low scoring, and like basically everyone's healthy. So it's tough to really like someone in this game.
It really is, and it's basically the same story on the opposite side. I mean, I read off those ownership numbers for Chicago and Washington. Chicago 120 on DraftKings. Washington 250. Milwaukee's at 25. Miami is at 22. So these are 2 of the 3 lowest owned teams. There's not a single player on Miami north of 10% in ownership. Hero and Butler just snuck over that mark on FanDuel. There's just very little love coming in. Now, I like the main 3 guys for Miami in relationship to their ownership. I think they become interesting GPP options on a 5-game slate, whether that's Hero or Bam or Butler. It's not going to take all that much if you guys wanted to take a stand on one of those guys for today. I like them a lot in large field GPPs, but in terms of a volume play, I don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, you got Rozier back, and he missed their most recent game where he's probable, so he's expected to play. I missed the last 2 games, actually. Price points up a bit on Bam, Hero, and Jimmy Butler because of it. I think mainly I'm just looking to those 3 as contrarian options. Bam in competitive games is playing like 35 plus minutes. We know the ceiling is there on Hero and Rozier. It's just kind of hard for me to prioritize them. And then the rest of the rotation, like they're just running a really deep rotation. It's kind of hard to figure out what the Heat are going to do on a night in, night out basis with kind of those like secondary pieces. Like, did you see like Larson played 36 minutes in their most recent game? I was just looking at that after like barely playing recent games.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with everybody that isn't obviously going to play 35 plus. Like Drew Smith played 25 2 games ago, but he is no part of this rotation. That's just because like guys are out. Burks played 31 last time out with no Rozier and obviously no Smith. Larson goes from non-existent to 36 minutes. Jay Rich is all over the place. Jovic went from back-to-back 30-minute games to 8 and 6 in his next 2. Good luck figuring out who they're choosing to be in their rotation today. I think that also helps to make it really easy in that you basically can't play anybody else on Miami unless they're the main 3 dudes.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to get to anyone else outside of those top 3. I mean, Kevin
Yep.
Love did see a slight minutes bump last game. He's a good point per minute player, but I just don't trust it. Like, he played 19 minutes in the most recent game. I don't really trust it. He's probably going to be hovering in the low to mid teens minute range. And with the opportunity cost, I don't think it's necessary to go there. So, yeah, I think mainly it's just Bam, Jimmy, and Hero as kind of contrarian options.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about this one. I do think Miami looks interesting and like more interesting than Milwaukee does. But
Mm-hmm.
this is a game where if you wanted to build out some lineups of some combinations of like Hero, Butler, Bam, Dame, Giannis, Lopez, and just eat aggressive chalk in all of the other spots, like you grab three pieces from this one and chalk it out. I think you could probably build a really interesting lineup in a larger field contest, but you're going to have a lot of trouble building a volume of them.
Yep, agree.
And then we get Houston and Minnesota, another weird one to look at. Houston, 3.5 point dogs in Minnesota, 220 total. Everything that we're kind of used to for these teams is pretty commonplace here, except Jalen Green is questionable, and that will definitely matter if he happens to be out. We're getting 20% ownership to Amin Thompson on DraftKings, 15 to Jabari Smith, and then 10 to Jalen Green on FanDuel. Everybody else is in the single digits. Tough team to talk about. What do you see for Houston?
Yeah, so with Jalen Green, again, he is on the injury report, but I expect him to play. He was participating in the shoot around. It's the same illness that he played through in the most recent game. So fully expecting Jalen Green to play. Looking at the ownership, I kind of like Alfred Şengün as contrarian option. So
Same.
I don't know if the field will necessarily pick up on this, but in their last two competitive games, 36 and 39 minutes, we've seen the minutes increase for Şengün. Against Portland, that game was a massive blowout. He only played 25 minutes. But he played 17 first half minutes, and then the game against the Pacers was also a blowout, dealt a little bit of foul trouble. So, like Şengün has like 35 minutes or so in the range of outcomes for sure. It's not necessarily the best matchup, but since the ownership is not there, I kind of like him as a contrarian option. Amen Thompson is getting the most love, around 20%, 5K, firmly in the rotation. The minutes can fluctuate a little bit on him. Like, if he's struggling, they don't have to be there, but he's playing well. They could very easily extend him. Like, he played 35 minutes last game. So he's a fine value play. The ownership of Jabari Smith scares me a little bit. It's come down a bit, but like his minutes are also all over the place. If he's playing well, they can extend him. If not, like, they can very easily limit him to like 20 or so minutes. So I find it interesting that like Jabari Smith is around 15% and Tari Eason is unowned, because in games where Jabari Smith is struggling and maybe losing minutes, you're probably going to see that minutes increase for a guy like Tari Eason. So at 1%, I wanted to mention that as a viable contrarian play. You're getting around 5% to Green, Van Vliet, and Dylan Brooks. I don't really have any super strong takes there. And then, yeah, I'm not going to get to like any of the other Rockets, but I think Şengün, looking at ownership, probably my favorite option. And then, yeah, Men Thompson, solid value, a little bit interested in Tari Eason as a dart throw in tournaments.
I like that Şengün shout out. You just compare him immediately to a 25% owned Vooch. Basically the same price, but 25 to 7 in ownership. I don't think the gap between those guys is as wide as the ownership is showing. So like swapping out Vooch for Şengün, that feels like a really good tournament option if that's something that you're building out. Like, I'm with you on the Jabari Smith thing. I'm right around the field there. He might play 22 minutes. He might play 36 minutes today. You never know. Kind of like the Houston version of Josh Giddey, but inverse, maybe. Better defensively than offensively. I'm getting Amin Thompson. I think it's just a flexibility thing. He's in 25% of my lineups, 5K, guard forward, just kind of fits. His path to additional minutes is basically like play decent and then you just get them from somebody else, which is not too difficult for Thompson. But I don't have a ton of anything else. A share or two of Van Vliet, a share or two of Green, a random Eason lineup, a random Dylan Brooks lineup. No major stands for me other than getting some Thompson and Smith, but I do like Şengün as a potential GPP option here. Super chat, since we're talking about it. Hey guys, Sean Jeezy in the house. Hey guys, any thoughts on the rotation in minutes in Houston, Minnesota due to cup implications? Feels like Ime Udoka. Oh, I just said Imi's name as if it were there. Feels like Udoka might push minutes here, but would love to hear your thoughts. I kind of have the same thought about this one as I do for like every other tournament game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think that in competitive matchups, these guys all get their minutes juiced and they play it out a little bit harder when it's competitive late. The problem is that is just never supported in the betting markets. It like none of these teams where you think, oh, they're probably going to play a decent chunk of time, you don't see them gaining much in the market that is like implying that there's an extra 2 minutes to go for every one of these guys. And that's the only thing that really scares me is if I start projecting it that way, I am taking a giant stand because I'm going to be across the board 2 fantasy points higher than everybody else when I run that kind of stuff. So I don't really make any changes for any of these situations because I just can't find a way to do it realistically. I don't like it though, because I agree. Like, Houston's 2-0, Minnesota's 1-1. If Minnesota loses this game, they're done in the cup. Houston obviously has some wiggle room, but they also have a plus 49 differential, so they're sitting pretty if they can get to 3-1 and get into the tiebreaker. So, like on paper, it seems like yeah, both of these teams are probably going to let it rip. I just don't know what to do with that. How do you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I kind of lean them playing a little bit more too. Again, Houston, as you mentioned, 2-0. So like if you wanted to add another minute or two to the main guys, I think that's totally reasonable. So yeah, like we kind of talked about that. What was it? I think it was like Cleveland against Boston last week. And you actually you did see the increase in the main guys, but you ended up having a couple like the bench pieces get rolled out too. But yeah, I think, the main guy seeing a few extra minutes in a game that means a little bit more is, definitely possible.
Yeah. I don't hate the idea of like taking that as a stand and moving forward with that information. Like I think that's a reasonable way to play it if you just want to sort of gamify this, but it doesn't ever have to be extreme. Like you don't have to look at Fred VanVleet and think like he's playing 40 tonight. Like you'll be just as fine going to like 34 or 35 over, like industry consensus, and that's going to do the job that you're looking for it to do. And that's the real logistical way to do it, because if either team is getting hammered in this one, like it's not going to happen the same way. You really need like a specific game script for it, but I get the path for it for sure. The Minnesota side looks kind of just like the Houston side, relatively low ownership, more of it coming in on FanDuel where these guys are a lot cheaper, but it's 15% ownership to Mike Conley, 13 to Gobert. Everybody in the starting five is between 10 and 20 on the FanDuel side. And I'm kind of seeing it the same way. I've got 10 of Edwards, 10 of Randall, 15 of Gobert, 10 of Mike Conley, a lone share of Naz Reid. I don't have any major stands for Minnesota, but if any team's going to just play their guys, it's Minnesota. They're just going to play 8 dudes pretty much no matter what. But we do have to wait on the Conley news, which will definitely impact things.
Yeah, Conley news is pretty important. He's right now 4.6K getting the most ownership, and I agree with it. The two most recent games that Conley has played, the minutes have ticked up for him as well, 37 and 30 minutes in those games. So like you would definitely have 30 minutes in the range of outcomes for Conley if he does play. Now, if Conley misses, you're either going to get DiVincenzo or Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the starting lineup. 2 games ago, it was NIW. Last game, it was DiVincenzo. 30 and 29 minutes over the last couple games for DiVincenzo. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 26 and 27 minutes. So those guys would see a slight uptick in minutes if you don't see if Mike Conley gets rolled out. Then you most likely would see a little bit of Rob Dillingham, but I don't think he would be viable. The potential assists on Anthony Edwards have gone up a bit in the 2 games without Conley, averaging 11 potential assists per game. But the price point on Ant is up. Like he's at 9.5K. So it's definitely hard to prioritize him, but obviously he is the guy with the highest ceiling on this team. Again, ownership relatively spread out from the main guys. Next up is Gobert at 6.6. Totally fine if you want to get to him. Not going to go out of my way to play him. Naz Reid coming in at 5K. Kind of like him as a contrarian option, around 5%. And then Randall around 5% as well, is viable. I think it's pretty tough to get to McDaniels at 5.2. Not the best point per minute player, and you definitely need the minutes to be there. But the Conley news is big because that could open up a little bit. If Conley does play, I think he would be my favorite option on Minnesota.
If Mike Conley doesn't play, does it open anything else to you? Do you see any path to like Rob Dillingham?
No, I don't think I get to Dillingham. I mean, in their most recent game, Dillingham played 15 minutes. Yeah, I think you need like something weird for me to get Dillingham. I mean, he had a decent game in that game, but I don't think I would take a shot on him on this slate.
Completely agree. Completely agree. I don't. He'll some kind of combination of him and probably Josh Minot will soak up
Mhm.
a tiny amount of minutes, and the other seven dudes are going to get an increase, and that's really what I expect Minnesota to do. I would not be looking at Dillingham today. Anything else from Minnesota?
No, I think I'm ready to move on.
Alrighty. Well, we got to talk about the deal, folks. You guys see the banner on the top of the screen. There's a link in the description of the video, and you're definitely going to get one in chat. We're getting into the Black Friday sale portion of the year, and we got one too. 50% off your first payment, weekly or monthly, for whichever sport you choose on a core or max package. So if it's NBA, great. If it's NFL, if it's PGA, if it's MMA, if it's NHL, whatever you're looking for, it's 50% off your first payment. Any single sport, core or max, whatever you're looking for, it gets you in behind the paywall if you use the promo code Black Friday. That is going to get you projections, ownership, all of the advanced data that we have behind the paywall. It also gets you our single lineup simulator, my favorite tool that we have, the contest generator, the full simulation package if you're looking to do a bit more multi-entry, even the post-contest sims where you can go back and try to evaluate what you're doing, see what you did right, see what you did wrong. All of this stuff is included in the package that you are choosing, and you're getting it for 50% off. This will be one of the better deals that we'll run across the year. Surely we run these dollar promotions that are usually, around a week. You can get 50% off a month. That's a sizable savings if you're looking to get behind the paywall to see what we have. And you could hop in our premium Discord, constantly stuff going on in there. We have everything that you could possibly want. And all you have to do is click that link and sign up with the promo code Black Friday. The San Antonio Spurs are 2.5 point favorites in Utah, 224 total. This one's pretty easy to talk about right now in that Devin Vassell's out, Jeremy Sohan's out, everybody else that normally plays for the Spurs is playing. For Utah, Clarkson's out, Filipowski's out, Cody Williams is with the G League. He's been that bad. But everybody else that's normally available is available. We are getting some love to San Antonio. 25% to Wemby on DraftKings, 20 to Castle, 10 to Champagne, 20 to Chris Paul. A little bit more extreme on the FanDuel side, where Wemby is in basically half of lineups, 30% to Castle, 20% to Paul. Do you have somebody standing out today on the DraftKings side? Is it Wemby, or are you looking somewhere else?
Yeah, no, it is Wemby for me. Reasonable price point there at 10.8K. Over the last 5 games for Wembanyama, he is averaging 1.86 fantasy points per minute. Like the spot here against the Jazz. So, I'm pretty high in Wembanyama. I think right now, looking at like all the spend ups on the slate, he's probably my preferred spend up. So he looks really, really good. Other guys getting ownership. You're getting like Castle and Paul both around 20%. 6.3K for Chris Paul, I think stands out as a pretty safe option. Should play around 30 minutes in competitive games. So totally fine with that. Castle coming in at 5.2, really, really solid minutes for him. For the last 5 games, 33, 35, 34, and 33 minutes. He's getting shots up there. He's, distributing the ball as well. So he stands out as another pretty safe, good point per dollar play. So yeah, no issue with Castle and Paul. The ownership is there, but I think it should be. Going down the line a bit more, I kind of like Keldon Johnson as contrarian play, 5.4K, getting basically no ownership. Now he's missed the last few games with the hamstring injury, but I don't think there's going to be any sort of a limitation on him. The minutes can fluctuate a little bit for Keldon, but in games that, he's playing well, you have, high 20s to even about 30 minutes in the range of outcomes. So I think he's a solid contrarian option. Champagny coming in around 10% feels about right. Harrison Barnes has played really well, but kind of outlier games, in my opinion, over the last few. And then last guy really to mention is Trey Jones, kind of just as a really cheap option coming in at 3.4K. Don't think it's necessary to go there on this slate. I think for me, I would prefer Collier on the opposite side for the Jazz, who we'll talk about. But Trey Jones over the last 4 games, 19, 17, 18, and 23 minutes. It's just that he's been not a great point per minute player. So again, I don't really think it's necessary to go there. But yeah, overall, I think Wembanyama is the guy that I'm really looking to for San Antonio.
Yeah, I got 30% of Wemby, and then I have 30 of Castle, which I think is a little bit over the field and probably helping me to not get to George and Kispert. I have 20%, or sorry, I have 20% of a 10% owned Julian Champagny. Same sort of scenario here, kind of my Keyshawn George, Corey Kispert filler, at least for this moment, and then dead neutral to the field on Chris Paul. I like that Keldon Johnson shout out. Could easily drop a bit. I mean, I don't think he needs a ton. Like anything over 30 fantasy points for Keldon Johnson today is at least going to put you in a conversation of him being a completely reasonable play for you on just a 5-game slate. I did get one lone share of Trey Jones. I mean, his path to playing a couple extra minutes is he's basically just like the Jalen Smith of San Antonio. He's just going to be the backup for Chris Paul. If anything's going weird for Chris Paul, I would expect Trey Jones to just sort of naturally step into a couple of extra minutes. So I could see it. He's not going to look great, and it's not like I would want a lot, but I don't mind that he is someone that is showing up in a lineup for me right now. I don't have any of the Barnacle of the Bay. Apologies to Harrison Barnes. I'm a big fan of your name, but I do not have you in any lineups right now, even though you are the current Western Conference Player of the Week, which surprised me to say the least. I mean, obviously he had some good games, 22-8, 25-10, 20-8 over his last 3. I'm just going to assume that he doesn't make every shot that he takes moving forward since he's Harrison Barnes, but it's going well for Harrison Barnes over the last week.
You get those like random Harrison Barnes like weeks where he just like goes off. Usually it was at like the beginning of the season. I remember I think for like 3 seasons straight, it was like the first week of the season, Harrison Barnes was one off, and then he went back to being the normal Harrison Barnes. So, I mean, he's had a really good last few games, but don't really expect that trend to continue.
Now, shooting 44% from 3 on the year, 66% true shooting. I mean, he's been in the 60 to 65 range over the past 4 years as well, so that's interesting. The big step up for him, he's been consistently like a 3 to 3.5% offensive rebound rate. It's 6.7% so far this season. So he's clearly crashing more on the offensive glass than he was ever doing for Sacramento. So his rebounding numbers are a little bit different than what we've come to be used to. Defense, on the other hand, has become non-existent. Half the steal rate, block rate is non-existent, but the rebounding is the interesting piece for Barnes that might be a little bit different moving forward, something I'm keeping an eye on. But we're talking about a 14% usage guy that really only shoots when he's open. So I can't just bank on him being a complete sharpshooter every time he does it. But you probably get slightly better looks when you play alongside Victor Wembanyama.
Yep.
Okay, what else do we got here? I don't have anything else I think I want to add for San Antonio. So let's get to the Utah side. Chunk of ownership coming into these guys. They look pretty similar to San Antonio. 15 for Markkanen, 15 for Collins, 20 for Kessler, 25 for Keontae George, 25 for Colin Sexton. Pretty similar ownership numbers coming in on the FanDuel side. Only other guy that's getting any love is Collier, who you mentioned at 8% on the DraftKings end. I'm a bit over the field on Utah right now. Basically like 50% more than the field. I've got 35% of Markkanen. That seems like it's going to be a stand for me. I've got 30% of Collins. That feels like a bit of a stand. Slightly over on Kessler. Neutral to George. Neutral to Sexton. I kind of like this Utah team.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm surprised they're not getting more ownership with Clarkson and Filipowski out. So Sexton, probably the first guy we should talk about, 5.8K. Now, 2 games ago, he kind of got his minutes trolled in the game without Clarkson. He only played 24 minutes. They actually closed with Collier over him. Last game with Clarkson back, he played 38 minutes. So he is one of those guys where like the range of outcomes for minutes is relatively wide. But you would assume with Clarkson out that he should push for 30 plus minutes, in a spot like this. So on the season with Clarkson off the court, he's about a 27% usage rate. So I think Colin Sexton's a really solid play with shooting guard eligibility. Keontae George next in line, basically identical ownership, 5.5K. Seems like a pretty good point per dollar play as well. In competitive game, you should see 30 plus minutes from him. He has not really shot the ball the best this year, but minutes floor has been pretty consistent. Now looking at the front court here for the Jazz. So with Clarkson off the court, John Collins, 260-minute sample size, 1.4 fantasy point per minute player. He's been starting alongside Kessler. Earlier in the year, they were not playing those guys together, but Clearly that has changed, especially with Filipowski out. So 7.3K for John Collins. Yeah, reasonable ownership on him. He looks pretty good. Lauri Markkanen, 7.4. Like his upside, solid option as well. Walker Kessler coming in around 20%. Maybe going a little bit over owned, but I get what's happening. There's a few other centers in that range that you could look to at lower ownership, but he's still a totally reasonable option. And the last guy for me in play is Collier, as I mentioned, 3.4K. He saw, again, in their most recent game without Jordan Clarkson, he played 24 minutes. He closed over Sexton. So we do have, 20 plus minutes in the range outcomes with Collier. We actually saw him, it was like a couple weeks ago too. He started the second half over Keontae George. So I think this team clearly wants to give this guy minutes. Now, the downside is he's not the best point per minute player, but at 3.4K, I think for me, if I'm going to take a shot on someone like on the really cheap end, it would be him. I like this Utah team. I'm a little bit surprised that they're not getting more love by the field.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel. I think that's why I'm getting to, I got 155% and they're 107 right now. I actually got a loan share of Drew Eubanks, who is basically the Jalen Smith backup center option from Utah in comparison to Chicago. I did get a share of Collier. Wouldn't be mad in any way if I got a second. That would look totally fine to me. But it is going to be a stand for me on Markkanen. Seems like I have him projected a little bit more aggressively than industry consensus, and I'm okay with that. I like this spot for him quite a bit. Not having Clarkson around is certainly going to be a benefit for him to have the ability to take more shots if he's looking for it. But I'm just happy to have quite a bit of Utah here. I'm happy to have a lot of this game just for the simple fact that, like, if I do need to start doing some swaps, at least this one's the 9 o'clock start and not the 7 o'clock start. I have the opportunity to move some stuff around if things break, particularly if it breaks. We should get news for Jalen Green at 7:30. Like, if that goes wrong, at least I have some Utah and San Antonio to shift a bit to get to anything that looks a little bit better for Houston. I'm glad those games aren't flip-flopped in order. That would get even worse.
Yep.
Anybody else we should be mentioning here? The fact that Markkanen is 8% owned on FanDuel at 7,900 also catches my eye. That's oddly low for a guy that's a 1.1 fantasy point per minute dude in this spot. He feels like a pretty decent GPP option on the FanDuel side, but I like these starters.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite teams to target for tournaments. I just think they're going a bit overlooked right now. Basically, all the main guys.
All right, I know just told you guys about the Black Friday deal. That's pretty fun on the DFS side, right? Gets you whatever you're looking for in whatever sport. But we're not just doing it on Stokastic. Odds Shopper wants to make you guys feel a little bit better as well. If you're on the sports betting or pick'em side, 75 off using the promo code thanks. That's percent, by the way, not dollars. 75% off a monthly Odds Shopper subscription with the promo code thanks. The easiest way that I could explain Odds Shopper to you guys is if you go to Twitter right now and go to Greg Ehrenberg's Twitter. He is doing a bankroll challenge since the start of the NBA season. He started with a $100 bankroll. He's taking only plays that come out of Odds Shopper. They're all being tracked on Twitter every single day. And he's rolled that $100 over $400 in the first month of the season. If that doesn't explain what this tool is doing, I don't know how else we could possibly do it. But that is the best case study of what you guys can be doing. You don't need a massive bankroll to get started. The plays are all there. The ease of use for this tool, you'd be shocked. 1 or 2 button clicks, you're immediately on the sportsbook. Recommended bet sizes are in front of your face. It doesn't get any easier for you, and you get it for 75% off. You guys should go immediately to Greg's Twitter and check out what he's doing. Every single day that he's done it, it's all tracked on his Twitter feed. Full recap at the end of every day with every bet's result. He's smashing. He's absolutely smashing. And that is not a outlier outcome for the Odds Shopper tool. We're seeing this constantly across the board. People are loving it. And the fact that you can get in for 75% off, this is the biggest no-brainer that we have. Clearly, I want you guys to sign up on the DFS side too. If you are ever betting on sports or if you're using the pick'em sites, Odds Shopper is absolutely going to make your life easier when you do it. So, thanks is the promo. Click the link. Final game, Late Night Hammer. The Los Angeles Lakers are 2.5 point dogs in Phoenix, 234.5 total. And this one is interesting. We got Jackson Hayes back on the Lakers side. Everybody that's normally available for these guys is available. We're also getting Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant back on the Phoenix side. Now, the Phoenix side's getting no ownership whatsoever. That looks a lot like Milwaukee and Miami. Getting a little bit of a trickle into the Lakers. 10% for LeBron on DraftKings, 25 on FanDuel, around 15 for AD on both sites, and 15 to 20 for Reeves across both sites. Russell sneaking in a little bit of love at 8% on DraftKings as well. Is it LeBron for you? Is it AD for you? Is it none of these guys for you? What are you seeing here?
I think it's AD. Right now on DraftKings, he's getting the most ownership, but not by a wide margin, coming in sub 20%. So like the upside on AD, like the matchup here, whether it be against Nurk or Oso or Mason Plumlee, like AD should be able to have his way here. So I think he looks like a pretty good spend up. LeBron James coming in at 10K. Also no issues with him. Again, with D'Lo moving to the bench, the assist numbers have looked better for LeBron. Austin Reeves hovering around 10% as well. Totally reasonable play there in the mid-range. Not really going to go out of my way to play him, but I think he's a solid option. D'Lo a little bit less than 10% owned, at least on DraftKings. 4.5K. The price has come down on him to a point where I think he is in play. If he's playing well off the bench, you could see, 24, 25 minutes. He saw 26 minutes there against the Jazz, 30 minutes against the Spurs. So, the minute ceiling is still there for him if he is playing well. 4.5K is a reasonable price point. And I do think Connect is still viable, even though he's coming off the bench. So, games that he was starting, he was playing high 30s minutes, but he still saw a decent run in the most recent game. He played 28 minutes, 5.1K. Like, you could very easily see him play over guys like Rui or Reddish and, get 30 plus minutes again. And we obviously know the ceiling is there, even playing alongside the main guy. So at about 1% ownership, I think he is a reasonable contrarian option, but that's really it. I'm not going to get to anyone else in the Lakers.
Reeves is the only guy I'm getting to with any sort of volume, and I'm a little surprised that I'm getting as much as I am just based on the rates that I have in front of me, but he's in 30% of my stuff. I did get a little bit of Russell over the field, a random Rui lineup, a random Dalton Connect lineup, but zero of Anthony Davis, which I'm not super comfortable with, but I do have a little bit more Wemby. Giannis could work his way in there. I do like the upper mid tier a little bit more than I like the true top end today. A little bit of LeBron, nothing too crazy. Relatively tame on the Lakers, but I'll probably dig into Austin Reeves the moment this show ends because I have a slightly more than I think that I should. I like AD, by the way. I don't want to undersell him in any way. He looks great. Happy to have him in any situation. He's really, really good at basketball. Just doesn't happen to be in my DFS lineups today.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think if I'm spending up for center, I would give the nod to Wembanyama over AD. But yeah, can't go wrong with AD against the Suns. Ceiling's massive. So
yeah, it's never a bad thing to have Anthony Davis in your lineup if that's where you're landing and that's where your salary works out. Like it's going to work out for you regularly-ish. I mean, it's rarely bad, but I just happen to like some of the other pay-up options a little bit more than him. I mean, I kind of like LeBron more than I like AD relative to salary, given position and stuff. Although LeBron being power forward center is, I guess I get it. It could be worse, but I'll take the flexibility however I can get it. And then we get to Phoenix, final team for the day. No one more owned than 7% on DraftKings. We did get Devin Booker sneaking into the double digits on FanDuel at 13%. I'm fascinated by Yusuf Nurkic today being unowned. I don't really have much interest in Booker or Durant or Beal. We kind of know what these guys are like when they're all together. They kind of just like they might be better as a team than the sum of their parts is better as a team, but it really invalidates all three of them from a DFS perspective, especially Booker, who's priced as if these two guys aren't playing today. So that certainly doesn't help him. But I want you to go straight to Nurk here. Unowned on both sites. I have no idea what we get out of him out of playing time. His minutes are Josh Giddey-esque, very wild. Mm-hmm. Do you like him?
I'm glad you called it out because he was the one guy in the Suns that I like. I like him a lot as contrarian play. Now, this year against the Lakers, the minutes have not been amazing on him. Last year, he actually did play pretty well against Anthony Davis. It's just one of those things where, if he's playing well, they could very easily extend him and play 30 plus minutes. Like last game against the Knicks, he played 33 minutes. If you just look at the box score for him, right? 33 minutes, 14, 29, 22, 15. So he is a type of player that I would rather play at low ownership as opposed to high ownership. Like if Nurk was getting ownership in the slate, I really wouldn't have much interest. But since he's basically unowned and we know that ceiling is still there, I do kind of like him. I think he's my favorite play on the Suns. I don't really think that KD and Beal being back really hurts Nurkic. Again, he's gonna make a lot of his points from like rebounds and blocks and steals and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So he was the guy that I was going to mention. I like him quite a bit as a contrarian play, unowned. The rest of this team, though, I think is really hard to get to. I would assume that, you're going to see some sort of a limit on KD and Beal. KD's been out for like 3 weeks. Booker's price is up from when those guys were out. Now they're back. A lot of the value plays are really hard to get to. Guys like Allen and Royce O'Neal, we're seeing, extended minutes. With two of those guys out, they're now back. So I think for me, it's really just Nurkic, and I do like him as a GPP play.
I'm glad we're on the same page here. Look, like we got to remember, it's the type of contest that you're playing in. Like you're not looking at Yusuf Nurkic and playing a 50-50 or a double up or a head-to-head. The goal is to try to win a larger field GPP if that's what you're getting into. And you don't do that by like playing it safe, so to speak. There are situations where you're taking on risk because when it's going well for Nurkic and he gets the minutes, this is a guy that's going to blow a $6,200 salary completely out of the water. And we're seeing his minutes be everywhere. You get that 14-minute game where he can't finish it and they're ripping him off the floor, then yeah, you're dead. But you're also probably dead if he played 22 as well. But then he comes back fresh off the injury, 33 minutes. If you think Yusuf Nurkic can play 33 minutes today, it's pretty wild to see him be essentially like 1 or 2% owned because he's just going to fall into it at that point. Like rebounds are just going to exist. Putbacks are just going to exist. Blocks and steals could just be there. I love the idea of getting to Nurk in any sort of larger field GPP contest because he is not getting represented the way that this could break. I mean, like, what if he's just out there playing 30 minutes against AD and trying to match up as much as he can, stays out of foul trouble? Like, that's going to be... We'll ultimately see him being like, oh my God, how didn't more people get to Nurk? It's going to be like, well, because he could have played anywhere from 10 to 34 minutes today, and I have no idea where to land that plane. But right now, I want to get to a little bit more of Nurk. That seems like the GP. He might be my favorite GPP option of anybody that exists today, and he's the last thing we're talking about.
Yep. No, agree. And I think like when you're playing tournaments, you're playing to wins. You're not really looking at the downside. You're more looking at the upside, right?
Yeah.
So like when things go right for Nurkic, well, what's the ceiling? Well, we've seen it like 30 plus minutes, and he has like 50 plus change points in the range outcomes. I feel like a lot of the field sometimes plays it a little bit too safe. They're playing not to lose. Like you should be playing to win, right? So
yes.
When he's getting no ownership, he's just someone that stands out as a good contrarian play.
Yeah. Last time out, 14, 12, and 3 with 5 stocks. I mean, we see these games where he gets north of 30 minutes. 34 minutes against Dallas, 15, 10, and 2 steals. 20, 18, 1 and 1. Sorry, 1, 1 and 2 against Miami. 28 minutes against Philadelphia. 15, 15, 2, 2 and 1. Like, even if you think that he's playing like 24 minutes, I think he's more interesting than a 1% owned guy. Like, and that's not even factoring in that he might play 8 more than that. So, Nurkic, I'm fascinated by you. Hopefully you're worth it tonight for us. DK, tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, so you guys can find me on Twitter. That's going to be DK__DFS, 2 underscores, or on YouTube, DK DFS. Do prop content as well as DFS stuff.
There we go, everybody. We've made it to NBA Live Before Lock. Hit that thumbs up right now. We're at 2,100 people in the door, 320 likes. No reason we can't run that up. So Greg and Eric get a little bit of a smile on their face when they get in the door. Black Friday deal, link in the description. Thanks deal for Odd Shopper, link in the description. Got to get all the tools, folks. It's going to be a fun run out to the end of this year. No reason you can't start now. Live Before Lock coming up next. Greetings.
What is happening, everybody? It is time for NBA Live Before Lock, NBA Cup action on this Tuesday. Only 5 games. They're spread out 30 minutes apart, so we don't have any games that are going to be locking at the same time, Eric. We've got a game locking at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and then 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the West Coast game. Some key players on the injury report. We got Jalen Green questionable. We've got Mike Conley questionable. Those are the ones that are going to be most pertinent to us on today's slate. And we're going to be breaking that all down. We got Black Friday deals that have gone live. So do us a favor, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's start by telling you about the Stokastic Black Friday deal, which you'll see in the top right portion of the screen right there. And pretty simple. If you guys are looking to sign up for our Core or Max package, which both include our Sims, sign up with that promo code Black Friday. But even easier than that, just click on the link down below in the YouTube description box, and you get 50% off any single sport Core or Max subscription package. So if you want to sign up for the NBA Max package or the NBA Core package, use the promo code Black Friday, get yourself 50% off. You could do it for MMA, you could do it for PGA, you could do it for NFL, whatever sports you guys want to sign up for. Now is the time to do it. Black Friday, it is the best time of the entire year for sales. And if you sign up, once again, that promo code Black Friday, 50% off any Core or Max subscription. So take advantage of that if you guys have been looking to sign up for any of our packages. And then, of course, anything you sign up for on the site also includes access to our Discord channel. We've also got an Odd Shopper promo going on. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But Eric, how are you doing today? And how are you feeling about the slate?
Feeling okay about the slate, seeing chat. Thank you. Yeah, we had Travis Kelce there as Elf on the Shelf. We also had Elf on the Shelf completely slam a slate yesterday, had tons, got a lot of people on, tons of him in the last 10 minutes. You want to be here for the entire hour because, well, lineups are going to roll out. We're going to get more information and we can give you better information. And that's part of why you also want to be checking out Greg and Josh on playback. I know I bring that up at the beginning of a lot of shows, but like, especially this time where you have a slate that's going to run the entire course of the day. Oh my God, Giannis is now questionable. He's not playing. Holy shit.
Giannis,
holy shit.
Questionable. One thing I will say about this is all the other the most likely scenarios, I don't think he plays. Every recent instance we've had this happen, though, the player has ended up playing. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion he's out, but probably a little bit more likely he sits than plays. That game is going to be locking in a little bit less than an hour and a half, Eric. So let's talk about what might happen if Giannis ends up sitting. But I mean, I do agree with you. I would say like 75% chance he ends up sitting. But how many times have we seen this? Like Evan Mobley gets downgraded to questionable 45 minutes before the game starts. And you and I go, oh my God, we have to project the Cavs if Evan Mobley is going to be out, and then he ends up playing. And then there was another one recently. Was it Steph? No, there was somebody else within the last week or so it happened to. But what's your confidence level? Giannis is not going to play
now. 80%. You said 75. Oh, I mean,
all right, yeah,
90%. You get a late downgrade an hour and a half, less than an hour and a half before the game. Like that's 90% of the time going to come to fruition. And especially when it's a star player like Giannis. I mean, this is them pushing the news back as late as possible because they want people showing up at the arena or buying tickets or doing whatever. And they're going to be very sad when they realize that Giannis Antetokounmpo is not on the floor and that it's the absolute Damian Lillard show. We also got news earlier in the day that Taurean Prince was upgraded from questionable to probable with that illness. And now, I mean, Giannis going the other direction. Left calf strain, he actually had an injury attached to him, even though he was probable. So I guess that's kind of what we're going to sell this as. The number one thing you need to know is Bobby Portis. If Giannis is out, he's 5,500. He's the best play on the DraftKings slate. Brooke Lopez, I thought was already nice for tournaments, was sub 5%. He will not be sub 5%. He's sitting at 6K. He looks good. Of course, Damian Lillard is sub 9K. We know that there were a lot of teams attached to Damian Lillard when they were looking to move him. Miami, I would say, was in the top 2 with Milwaukee. And sure enough, Miami did not get him. They're a team that, went for Terry Rozier last year or the year previous to that and is what it is. I mean, you just look at Damian Lillard here, sub 9K. He's going to be important. I think Taurean Prince is in play at 4,200. I think Gary Trent, somebody who has fallen out of favor at times, but has now been playing high 20s minutes, is in play. I know it's Miami and it's going to kind of mute a lot of our like full send interest, but I mean, I will full send Bobby Portis 5,500. He's kind of the main feature I'm looking at.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of updates come through here, and this is the second game to lock on the entire slate. Now, this is going to be an interesting part of this conversation, Eric, because what do we do if Giannis isn't ruled out before 7? Because there are very good looking value options right now from Washington, and it's only a 5-game slate. So I think we also have to talk about in relation to Giannis potentially being out, just because we've got 51 minutes to prepare here. I know I look at my lineups, and with Jordan Poole now out for the Washington Wizards, Kyle Kuzma not dealing with any kind of real strict minutes restriction at this point, he looks like a really strong value option to be getting to. So who are the players that we would still want to be getting to from the first game on the slate? And is there anybody that we'd potentially want to be limiting our exposure to make sure that we have more flexibility for the Bucks? And once again, this is under the circumstance where we head into lock and Giannis is still questionable.
Yeah, so Kyle Kuzma, I won't hit eject on whatsoever. He's 6,300. He's way too cheap. Him and Bobby Portis should be the two guys that when I rerun everything are my highest owned. Kaishan George, we're under the assumption that he's going to be starting here in this spot. If that were to change, I think we would definitely see that ownership change. I think that there's a lot of worlds where they don't necessarily... I mean, Malcolm Brogdon, Kaishan George, Bilal Coulibaly, Kyle Kuzma, Alexander Sarr. If it looks different than those 5, we're going to have to readjust some of this Washington stuff, and we'll revisit it. But I think the main guy who ends up getting cut immediately for me ends up being Corey Kispert. He was somebody that already they've just shown that they want to have him come off the bench here routinely. And now he's at 4,400 shooting guard, small forward. And we're going to get Milwaukee, whether it's Taurean Prince at 4,200, Gary Trent at 4,100, Andre Jackson, 3,900, even AJ Green, 4,200. I think these are all guys that I would prefer over a chalkier option. If we don't have that news at lock, I would probably fully trim Corey Kispert to a place where I didn't even have him. Alexander Sarr, I get it. I'm not in love with Alexander Sarr. I'm a little bit below this 50% number, but I would still have him in the portfolio, assuming that he starts. And, that's what he's been doing. So I don't think that changes. I think that's kind of the major rundown. It's basically Corey Kispert getting hit eject on. Kaishan George, if he starts, I would still have, probably ends up a little bit more muted at 4,200 with the other 4,200 and cheaper options. But certainly the guy who gets trimmed massively is Corey Kispert.
Yeah, so kind of interesting. You weren't really giving the exact answer I expected. I mean, it partially was. But for me, I really like the Bulls players as GPP targets because if you look at what their minutes were in their last NBA Cup game, what the Bulls ended up doing is, so they were 0-1 in the NBA Cup. So they lost their first game. Playing their second game. Now, all of a sudden, if they're going to make it in, they have to win the rest of their games, and the point differential comes into play. So if you watch that last game that they had in the NBA Cup, they left the starters in, even though the game was kind of a blowout through the end of the fourth quarter, and they're just sprinting up and down the court trying to get buckets as quickly as possible. And then as a result of that, you saw massive minutes to the starters. I'll pull this back up because I was looking
I thought you were just asking me about Washington. I didn't. You said nothing about the Bulls. If we had
first game on the slate.
Oh, I thought you just said Washington. So I broke down relative to Washington. I love Chicago. Chicago's not going anywhere in my lineups. I mean, we have Levine, 7,800, Kobe White, 7K, Ayo Dosunmu, assuming that he starts 5,500. There are lots of ways that things end up working in your favor here with those guys. And Patrick Williams being out, I mean, you were replacing massive starter minutes. With Washington on the other side, they're basically starting 3 guards. I mean, Coulibaly is just kind of like whatever to me. Malcolm Brogdon, we know, obviously point guard. They're going to have Carrington backing him up there to some extent, but it's a pretty easy team that if you want to play that 3-guard lineup, if you're the Bulls, you're going to play a lot of them. And then Vooch should tool Alexander Sarr to some extent. I would think Vooch is probably the guy that I'm the most interested to see where the number lands on him because we get Kuzma at power forward, we get Portis power forward center, but we'll obviously play him at power forward or at the forward spot. I'm very curious to see where he ends up in the scheme of things because he could legitimately walk into 40 plus minutes here too.
So there are players from the Bulls that I'm going to want to have some exposure to, but they're going to get trimmed for me because I can't get away from somebody like Kyle Kuzma. I could lower my exposure to Ayo Dosunmu. I could lower my exposure to somebody like Josh Giddey and feel that the upside of the potential of Giannis being out is going to outweigh the minutes upside of the Chicago Bulls guys. because I was really not sure what to make of some of the minutes for the Bulls. When you look at what happened in their last NBA Cup game that they played against the Atlanta Hawks last week, and I mean, we got 37 and a half minutes out of Kobe White, 33 minutes out of Josh Giddey, 38 and a half minutes out of Ayo Dosunmu. Then we got 33 and a half as well out of Zach LaVine. But the big minutes gainers, it was Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, as well as Josh Giddey in that last game. And I tend to think those minutes are still going to be there for them. But it goes back to what I was saying before. I'd rather gamble on the upside of the Bucks guys. And this is, once again, all in the event that Giannis would still be questionable heading into lock.
With you. 100% with you. And in the event that Giannis plays, I would probably pivot on to tons of him. I would think most people are doing what we're doing. I mean, I just took him out of my stuff. I updated all my minutes. I'm getting to an unbelievable amount of Gary Trent, Bobby Portis, and Damian Lillard. I mean, all three of them just look absolutely outrageous. I think because center is valuable with Wembanyama, with Anthony Davis, both in NBA Cup games. Even Şengün I find to be pretty interesting. John Collins, power forward center, and now we're going to play Kuzma. We're going to play Portis. I would think that, some of that ownership has to come down on John Collins. Like, there are some unbelievable plays at center where Brook Lopez just doesn't really have a place here. But I think Taurean Prince is kind of interesting. But like, again, this is going to be tons of Milwaukee for me now.
Yeah, I'm trying to find what the verbiage is from a report to see if there's any kind of information we could glean out of that. Not really. Just seeing left knee effusion. I don't know. All right, so we'll see what ends up happening here. It would certainly be annoying if we find out 15 minutes before the game that Giannis is playing and I lowered some exposures to guys from the first game, but we'll see how this comes. Definitely going to be a spot here where you guys are going to want to stick around and watch the post-lock show with Josh and I to see what ends up breaking there, because don't forget, in addition to Giannis being questionable, now we still have Jalen Green questionable, Mike Conley questionable. Those are also key pieces to the slate. Let's start looking at your guys' super chats. Jordan, were any of these answered during the last show?
What a time to be alive.
Which ones? Okay, so we answered the first two super chats then. So we answered Skylar Bernard. Well, actually, I'll read off Skylar's anyway, because this actually isn't a question. I just went over it here. It says, I'm a huge fan of the stream. Been in the NICU with my firstborn for the past few days, and the streams have lightened the mood to give me some much needed entertainment. Much love from Nebraska. So I'm happy to read that one off for sure. Congrats to Skylar, and thanks for supporting the shows. Really do appreciate it. Looks like Sean's question was already answered. So let's get to Willie Jenkins' question, which this has to be directed, Eric and myself. He wants to know, what kind of makeup do y'all wear for these shows? Whatever Jordan gets me at the supermarket and sends. I'm not too selective. In all honesty, though, I've worn makeup once in my life when I did a TV spot for DraftKings doing like New York TV stuff. And I didn't know that you were supposed to remove it in any kind of way. And I got a terrible eye infection from it. My eye was swollen shut. So I will never wear makeup again. Eric, what kind of makeup do you wear?
So, I mean, I've only ever worn makeup one time. Remember when I wore the glasses because I got smacked? My face was all dinged up. I fell on the ground, and there we are. Yeah, those were good times. But yeah, otherwise, this is all natural, baby. I'm beautiful no matter what they say. Words can't bring me down.
With that said, words can absolutely bring Eric down. We've seen him come unraveled more than once due to
no, they can't.
Due to nothing but somebody with 8 followers on Twitter.
Shut up.
Saying something,
okay.
Saying something in mean spirits, and it will ruin Eric's month. It'll completely come on.
I'll ruin your month.
Come undone.
I'll show you a
absolutely
month.
Bring him down. Nate says that he turned $1.50 into $1,400, scoring 380 fantasy points last night, thanks to Elfrid Payton. You guys are goated, but listen, Eric was the one who was really calling out Elfrid Payton yesterday. I raised my exposure to Payton right before lock as a result of Eric, and I also had a nice night last night. Had one live lineup that I felt really good about. It had Jokic remaining in it. If I could have gotten like 60 fantasy points out of Jokic, I would have been top 5 in the $15. If I would have gotten, I think the number was 66 fantasy points, I could have come in first in the $15 last night. It wasn't meant to be. The game ended up being a blowout. But a profitable night. Eric definitely helped me with that as well. So shout out to Nate. Good to see you having some success there. And then Chris Williams gifted out 5 YouTube memberships. So as always, Chris, thank you for supporting the channel here. And if everybody else wants to support us, just simply like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Jorge wants to know, who are the must plays for a single entry DK contest? Boy, this has gotten pretty muddy now with Giannis being questionable. But let's see what direction we want to go to answer this question.
I mean,
I still have to say Kuzma.
Yeah, Kuzma looks great still.
If he starts, I'm still going to say Keyshawn George. If he starts.
Yep.
I would have said Sarr before the Giannis news, but now maybe less so if I want to have the flexibility for maybe Bobby Portis to be inserted into lineups, especially when you consider the other 2 guys I mentioned are both forward players. Man, I'm trying to think what else I want to answer for this, because I really want to have some of the flexibility available to us. So I'm not going to say anybody from the Bulls side of the game. How about you, Eric? Anybody that we're going to call, given the information we have right now, must plays in single entry? You know that you need to have flexibility to make late swaps later, so you can't be too heavy on the first game. But my 2 favorite players to be getting to in the first, and they're also really popular, so I'm not going on a limb here, but Kyle Kuzma and Keyshawn George, once again, assuming George starts, those are 2 guys I think you should play. But what else would you add to that mix, Eric?
Those are the 2. I'd throw Sarr in as somebody to think about. Corey Kispert is somebody to think about. Again, I just got done saying I want 0 of him. But again, there's worlds where sharp players in single entry are going to make the kind of adjustments that we are talking about right now. And then you walk into a sub 15% owned Corey Kispert who knocks down 7 threes in an up-tempo game against the Bulls. Like, this is a phenomenal single entry slate, but I think the best thing you can do is utilizing the single lineup simulator and just kind of going in and plugging some iterations, and then keeping in mind that there should be 2 or 3 spots that are devoted towards Milwaukee Bucks, be it Damian Lillard. Maybe you want to go Gary Trent, who has shooting guard eligibility. And I'm starting to find myself kind of enamored with getting to a little bit more of him now that he's back in that rotation and doing some things. I am probably going to say the priority, though, Kyle Kuzma. That's probably the only guy that I'm like, it'd be really hard to give up Kyle Kuzma at 6,300 against the Bulls in this spot with a pretty undersized team, knowing his rebound potential, knowing his usage potential, playing with Brogdon at the point, no Jordan Poole to strip it away. How many times have you seen Jordan Poole sharing the floor with Kuzma, and now you remove one of the 2 and the other guy's usage goes way up? All the time is the answer. And so for me, it's kind of Kuzma, and that's it right now.
Okay. Yeah, really the most important is going to have some flexibility here, Jorge. We've got key players on the injury report. We just found out that Mike Conley, he is going to be a game-time decision. We already knew he was questionable with the toe injury. He's missed the last couple of games. Now we're not going to find out his actual status until right around game time, and that game is locking at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So it's news that almost certainly Josh and I are going to be finding out about on the post-lock show. We'll be going over the implications of it. But yeah, most importantly, going into the slate, just give yourself a little bit of flexibility to make your swaps. And then Kyle Kuzma, I also like Keyshawn George from the first game, but I would, at least as of now, I would avoid some of the Bulls players for single entry.
Well, not only that, but you're going to get that extra half hour. The one guy that I'm very curious to see, and we have him under-owned here at the moment at 21%. I'm very curious to see what happens with Jalen Green. And now Amin Thompson could end up being a guy that, I mean, he could end up way, way low owned relative to what I thought he might be. Because I thought we were going to come into this show and focus on Green. And then as soon as we start, of course, Giannis gets downgraded to questionable. I think Amin Thompson is a guy that in single entry, you just had that single entry question. I think he comes in way lower owned than he might have, because I think people are going to be kind of in that 4K range, building out their lineups ahead of time. Maybe we get that news within live before lock and it comes out a certain way. But like, shooting guard small forward Amin Thompson fits into lineups really nicely at 5K, and I would really want to get to him as like a late swap potential guy. And you get an extra half hour just by having Milwaukee, Miami guys in there, specifically the Milwaukee side, and then finding ways onto Amin Thompson where I think he would end up getting the start in the absence of Jalen Green.
Ideally for you, when would we get this Giannis news? Do we want it?
Oh, I want it after lock.
I want it after lock.
I've always been of the mind, if you do your own stuff, I would rather it came out 2 minutes before lock of that game. I would rather it came out at 7:28 p.m. Eastern time, 4:28 Pacific, because I have the Sims tool, I have my updated stuff, and I would be able to simply click, done. And right now, I don't think enough people would be on Andre Jackson the way that they would need to, Gary Trent the way they would need to, AJ Green would be like completely unowned, Pat Connaughton, obviously, and then the main ones that I think most people are going to build out their lineups right now just by ROI boosting or doing other things. It's pretty obvious to look at Damian Lillard and Bobby Portis as your main two featured items. I think we've done this however many years together, even before we were doing shows together. I could have told you in 2016 or 17, it's like, oh, you probably want to get to whomever because Giannis eats up so much of the statistical categories across. I mean, he has like 51.5 PRAs. And now we're replacing those minutes and that production and dispersing it everywhere. Damian Lillard gets such a bump. And then Bobby Portis is just maybe 3K too cheap at 5,500 for the situation, even against Miami in a game with a 222.5 total. So for me, I'm going to get to so much of these guys, and I would be able to do it in like 2 minutes. So yeah, build out however you want to do it, but you just want to do it on a slate like this.
All right, a couple more nice super chats coming through here. This one is coming to us, well, 2 super chats from Riley Shaffrey, and 2 nice ones. The first one says, I know this is an NBA show, but shout out to the Stokastic Sims for helping me tie for first $14,000 in NFL Showdown last night. It has been a great couple of months with y'all. And once again, if any of you guys want to sign up for the tools, now's the time to do it. We got that promo going on for Black Friday. Promo code easy enough to remember. Black Friday, 50% off any single sport, core or max package there. And then another super chat from Riley says, also, shout out to Eric for the Elfrid Payton call. I would have been top 3 in the $15 if Jokic played the fourth quarter. Yeah, it was a bummer that we didn't get that typical Jokic game because I'm on the same page. Would have been really, really nice. Instead of it being modestly profitable, could have been a killer night. Eric and I were texting back and forth about it for a good amount of time. One thing that we did get a little lucky on, Eric, was the Knicks guys because when Kat was first rolled in, I was like, that's kind of a bummer. I don't really have swaps to make for stuff, and I have more Knicks guys than I wanted to. And then Tibbs just did not give a fuck. He ran I don't know if he thought it was an NBA Cup game where point differential mattered, but the Knicks are up by 30 points in the fourth quarter, and he's got the starters coming back in with 3 minutes left. So
it was incredible.
Would have been nice. Would have been nice if it was a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, I had a lineup in the $4 and in the $15 that had OG Anunoby. It was stuck with OG Anunoby, and I'm like, shit, this sucks. I have Brunson Anunoby, and I almost chased everybody down with it. It was kind of insane. And then Karl Anthony Towns, my nick of the night, I had in like 40% of lineups. I ended up turning a lot of my Brunson into Cat in the utility and had a little bit of swappability. The problem is anything you paired it with on the Denver side, be it Jokic, Brown, I had to get 2 and 1. Jamal Murray kind of worked out as an 8,400 one that I got off of a little bit of Jokic. He was like sub 1% owned. I hated it. I didn't like it. But there were a lot of things that could have really gone nuclear. But yeah, there's this Knicks team. I'm going to just say it over and over again. You're going to see them win a lot of tournaments this year because nobody's going to project ridiculously well, but they have 40+ minute upside even in non-competitive games. It's absurd what you're getting out of the Knicks day in, day out.
Next super chat here. It is from Willie Jenkins. Willie says he chopped first in a $5 single entry last night for $3,250.
Let's go.
Boy, this has been a pretty nice show for the super chats. Just get to shout out people who won a bunch of money the last couple of days. I could deal with that.
Yesterday was a movie. It was great.
Jay wants to know thoughts on Brogdon with no pool. Yeah, so Brogdon is I would have liked Brogdon a lot more, 30 minutes ago before we started, before there was any of this Giannis news. So Brogdon certainly is somebody with upside. The question becomes, how much of Brogdon do I want to have using up lineup spots when he looks good, but there's potential for better guys who are going to be lower owned to open up later? So the answer is he looks good on a points per dollar basis, but I don't want to go crazy with my exposure to him because I prefer the flexibility.
I prefer the flexibility too. I don't want to go crazy on him, but would it shock you? I mean, can we agree he's the best NBA player on this Washington team by a country mile?
Brogdon's pretty washed now too. Let me actually go and look at. All right, if I go to dunks and threes, who do they project as the best player on the team?
I mean, it's gotta be Brogdon based on what I've watched here in the last however long. I mean, Brogdon's been good this year. Don't poo-poo it. I mean, he hasn't been good for two. He's shooting like 38, 39% from three. I updated my stuff the other day. He had like, because I kind of do it the same way that they do, where you try to go by each individual player and kind of see how they plug together. It's not a perfect way, but I like the estimated plus minus. I have him as a 75th percentile player. I'm not sure where they have him.
All right. So it depends which site it is you look on. So looking at Darko and then also looking at, so across, if you were to aggregate the projections from Darko and EPM, there's not a single net positive player on the entire team. If you go to
Makes
EPM,
sense.
the only net positive player they have projected is Malcolm Brogdon, and that is at a plus 0.01. So we're plus 0.1. So
Giannis out.
And there he goes. Giannis is officially listed out. So we're going to be getting projection updates that are going to come in soon. And when we do, we'll show it on screen and we'll adjust all our lineups. And yeah, we'll see what that ends up changing. I mean, immediate reaction, Eric and I already went over a lot of this at the top, but clear usage bump for Dame. He becomes a very high priority spend up option. And now you've also got Bobby Portis as well as Kyle Kuzma, because Bobby Portis, assuming he slides into the starting lineup, that's what we've seen the Bucks do previously. You got Bobby Portis, Damian Lillard, Kyle Kuzma, probably my three most rostered players on the slate now.
Yep, same. I mean, we're just going to jam them. This is going to be fun.
That's what's going to happen. By the way, Brogdon is negative 1.2 Darko plus minus.
I was saying, but he's the best player on Washington. I have him evaluated as the best player.
By the way, so Darko has Justin Champagnie as the most valuable player on the roster. And that's also with him being, they just have the entire rosters being massively negative. So
yeah, they should. They're all terrible. They suck.
They're no good bad team.
It's hard to look good if you have a terrible team around you too. We've seen that a lot with defensive metrics where a lot of players get traded to certain teams, or the inverse, a team that is terrible gets a player, high PJ Washington staring at you. Where they just completely look different on a different squad when they're asked to do different things.
Next super chat here. It is coming to us from Sam Van Dam. Sorry, almost missed Sam's question. He says, how do I preemptively adjust the sims to account for Giannis being out? Just zero him out. Will that automatically change the minutes for the rest of the team? So let's address this question in a couple of different parts. First, how to preemptively adjust the sims to account for Giannis being out. Well, here's the good news. He's out, and we're about to get a projection update, so you're not going to have to worry about that. But that aside, I know you asked this before he was ruled out, and let's talk about what you could do in these situations for the future. So one thing that you could do to start is to take Giannis, and once again, you're assuming that Giannis doesn't play at all in this scenario. Yes. So the first thing I would do is I would take him out in the contest generator, build a pool, you would X out Giannis, and then you would want to do ownership bumps to all of the guys who benefit, which would be slightly everybody on the Bucks, but significant bumps to guys like Bobby Portis and Damian Lillard. And then you would also have to change the projections for some of the players. So just zeroing out the minutes for Giannis, it doesn't do it automatically. You don't have to do it super scientifically, but I would say you go in, set Giannis's projection at 0, and then I would just change the guys that you would want to be getting exposure to. He's like Bobby Portis, just set him for like 37 fantasy points. Damian Lillard, put him in for like 47 or something like that, and then run the sim based on that information. And it'll give you like a rough guideline of what things would look like if Giannis was to be ruled out. And then you just wait for the official news to come out. But in this scenario, luckily, we do already have the Giannis news, so you're not going to have to make any adjustments for yourself. But good to know for future reference if you ever want to do that. DC24 wants to know, any love for my low-owned $7,800 Nemesis? So the short answer is I like Jimmy Butler relative to his salary, but there are so many good-looking forward options now. Kyle Kuzma is going to take up a bunch of lineup spots for me. I like getting to Keyshawn George. Bobby Portis is going to be somebody who's a very high-priority play for me. I'm not going to have that many lineup spots available for Jimmy Butler. I'm not doing my shtick where I shit on him or anything like that. It's really just he gets squeezed out because of his positions.
He gets squeezed out because of his positions. That is correct.
SC, look at this. Shout out to Greg for the Covey call on Sunday Night Football. And this is true. I was doing
Put up a zero.
We talked about this scenario where it was that there were so many high-priced guys to spend up for. Covey was a viable punt option, and he could be in the winning lineup even with 0 fantasy points. That's what happened. Nuts lineup on Sunday Night Football. Had Covey in it. He scored 0 fantasy points because he was $200. So SC says, shout out to Greg for the Covey call on Sunday Night Football. He did not get 1 fantasy point, and he shipped the showdown in 15 some other contests, turned $37 into $16,238, and says he appreciates you. Look at how often is somebody going to give you credit for recommending a player who scores 0 fantasy points?
Not often, but you know what? You did it, Greg. You did it. Congrats.
Look at that. Shout out. Yeah, let's keep these winning keep these winning lineups coming, guys. And then Connor says, what to do for DK Cash. So many early game plays. All right, let's see if the projections are updated at this point. I'm most interested to see the ownership projections, and we haven't gotten that starting lineup from the Wizards yet, correct?
No, but we got Bobby Portis projected for 41 fantasy points. He is the best play of the slate by a country mile. Damian Lillard projected for 50 fantasy points. He's the best play at point guard by a country mile.
Yep.
We're still going to play Kuzma, but I just want to throw this out there. Bobby Portis is $800 less, and we have projected for 3.5 more fantasy points. Like, Bobby Portis is like a full send. It's really not even close.
Yeah, we don't have an ownership update yet. I'm sure that'll be in like 30 seconds or something will come across. We do have a projections update for cash games. Kaishan George, play. Kyle Kuzma, play. Bobby Portis, play. Damian Lillard, play. Is there anybody else that you can actually, now that we have all this value available to us, I'd say Wemby, probably another guy that you're going to want to
for sure
into your cash game.
Wemby was going to be nuke of the night, I think, regardless. I think we're going to go to a different nuke of the night now. But Wembanyama is the guy that I'm prioritizing to pay up for. I already was. That wasn't really going to change. Damian Lillard, if you want to call that spending up at 8,900, but Damian Lillard is a good piece of value at 8,900. When you see all of his rates with Giannis off the floor, it's just ridiculous. I'll pull this back up because I had this up on Dunks and Threes as I was updating my stuff. And I mean, it's just silly. Just silly. Giannis off the floor is going to open up an opportunity for whoever slides into the starting line. But we all assume that's going to be Bobby Portis. Even if Bobby Portis, for whatever reason, comes off the bench, I don't care. You're going to want to get to him. You're going to want to play tons of him. But Damian Lillard, there's just no way around it. I mean, he's got a 1.37 DraftKings point per minute rate with Giannis off the floor over the course of the last year plus. I mean, it's like unbelievable going back to the beginning of last season. 1.37. It's an NBA Cup game where you're going to put him in for more minutes than normal, and he should do everything for them out there. I mean, Bobby Portis isn't far behind at 1.22. You have to remember Chris Middleton, also not in the middle of that sample size. So you can remove him out as well as you're working through everything and piecing it together. This is just such a slam dunk for Milwaukee. So Portis, Lillard, those are kind of the layups. We'll be able to fill in the gaps. And I think that's something that once that starting lineup drops, Greg and Josh will be able to talk a little bit more intelligently about on the playback show. Here you go.
The starting lineup for the Wizards. It is as expected. Brogdon, Koulibaly, Kuzma, George, and Sarr. So Keyshawn George still looking like a really good value option. One thing you mentioned there that I just want to, it's kind of nitpicking, but it is relevant to me because I was looking at this earlier. I don't know, one of two things. Glenn Rivers either doesn't know point differential matters or he doesn't care about it.
Yep.
The last game they played in the NBA Cup, they were up marginally. They had a game they were up. It was 15 points with 5 minutes left, and he took the starters out, and they were done for the day. So that indicates to me either he doesn't know it's a thing or he doesn't care it's a thing. Either way, we're playing a lot of Bobby Portis. We're playing a lot of Damian Lillard, but I'm not pegging these guys to play extra minutes because it's an NBA Cup game for that reason.
I get that. Again, it's like a minute that I take him up. I really haven't done a ton to change it. But yeah, with Giannis, no Middleton, 1.46 DraftKings points per minute for Damian Lillard, 837 minute sample size. Bobby Portis, 1.30. 41 minutes of Ryan Rollins at 1.16. That's kind of interesting. And remember, Cameron Payne is no longer on this team from last year. Patrick Beverley no longer on this team from last year. Malik Beasley no longer on this team from last year. Lots of guys that just randomly would chuck shots at times. And now that's going to be going towards Andre Jackson, who I'm not going to use his baseline at like 0.81, even against Miami. I'm not going to use some of these other baselines. I mean, it's such a fascinating spot. And so the two layups are obviously getting to more Dame, like tons of Dame, getting to an eternal amount of Bobby Portis. But I am very curious on like what else shows up as we start to run the Sims when we get the starting lineup. Torian Prince, Gary Trent, Andre Jackson Jr., Pat Connaughton. These are all guys in play. Even Ryan Rollins, somewhat in play. He played 22 minutes against Toronto in that winning effort last time out. Delon Wright, only 13 minutes for him. This is a spot against a former team for him. I don't really think that matters in any way, shape, or form. And Ryan Rollins, he was out. He had missed 5 straight games. He had a dislocated shoulder. I don't know what the minutes could look like, but he's 3K flat. And, you know, there's ways that he does stuff off the bench. I don't know. It's just such an interesting team overall. Can't imagine I'm going to get to Ryan Rollins. I'm just simply talking through every single iteration of this team because, well, it's going to be popular.
I am about to start running some updates in the Sims. I haven't looked yet, but I'm very curious. What do you think the ownership projection is going to be on Bobby Portis?
I would say 90%. I'm going to have him in 100% of lineups. I don't see a single lineup that I won't have him in.
I will, at a minimum, I'll have him in 90% of lineups. I think this is going to be another one of these situations like we've seen, you know, a couple other times this year where he's going to project for absurdly high ownership and he's going to be very, very high owned, but he's not going to be quite as high as the data says just because you get one of these guys where they project so insanely well from a points per dollar standpoint that they kind of break the ownership. We saw this actually happen the last time Giannis was out where Bobby Portis was projected for 88% ownership. And he ended up being very popular, but he was like 60% instead of the 88%. Either way, though, I'm with you. I'm going to have Portis in either all my lineups or at a bare minimum, like 90+% or so.
We just got the number. You want to guess?
90%.
Yeah, that's the number. No, I just remembered the last time that it happened. That's kind of what I was basing it on. 89.84%. Yo, how you doing? Yeah. I'm just playing 100%.
Yeah, I was just basing off what the ownership projection was last time because I remembered it being kind of a similar circumstance and similar size slate.
How have 41 minutes gone by on this show already?
For one, we got a lot of people who won GPPs and let us know about it, which was really cool.
Fun.
And then, you know, you get weird shit happening like Giannis getting ruled out and getting downgraded questionable out of nowhere, and it gives you talking points. And the time flies by. Another super chat here. This one is from Eddie T428I wants to know core FanDuel GPP plays by position. So I'm updating everything right now. But
looks like my DraftKings, to be honest. Portis, Wemby, Lillard. Those are 3 of them. Kaishan George FanDuel, on. I know. I'm literally doing FanDuel. I'm playing both sites. So Bobby Portis, Kaishan George, Victor Wembanyama, Damian Lillard. I think Brogdon looks extra good over on FanDuel, 5,300 for him. Point guard, shooting guard, always nice to have. You compare that over to DK, where currently he's at 5,600. I mean, I'm playing all of my Brogdon over on FanDuel for the most part, just playing a ton of him there. On DK, a little less so. Kyle Kuzma, 6,800, I think looks good on both sites. I think Corey Kispert, this is going to be the casualty of the slate for me. He's at 35% for us right now. I'm really going to hit eject on Corey Kispert. If he ends up having one of those games where he goes out, he sets the world on fire from 3, so be it. I'll live with it. I don't care. He's 4,400. Corey Kispert is not a good play over on DK on FanDuel, where he's 4,200 small forward. I doubt I really get there because there's no bonus for 3-pointers, and it would take an outlier like stocks game for him to really burn you there. I think that's probably going to be my edge, hopefully, on this slate. We have him over-owned ever so slightly in our projections, but I think that for the most part, the guys I listed off, it's very similar to DK. Bobby Portis, Kaishan George, Victor Wembanyama, Damian Lillard, Malcolm Brogdon, my 5 highest owned players.
Yeah, I'm going to say Sexton at point guard, though, at $5,900. I agree with you at shooting guard, Kayshawn George. Small forward, that's Kyle Kuzma. Power forward, Bobby Portis. I'll also add Damian Lillard to the mix alongside Colin Sexton at point guard. And then center, that's going to be Wemby. And Wemby's scoring. We're not even at peak Wemby yet. There's going to be a few. What do you, just quick question here, and then we'll do the nuke of the night after this. what is Wemby's price going to be at his FanDuel peak, considering how they score blocks and steals? I've been thinking about this for a couple days.
Yeah, so I think he'll be at one point in time 13.5 within the next year. I would say from now until, I mean, the thing is now we're also seeing him take tons of threes and start to really increase that usage. I kind of broke that down on NBA Lindy's yesterday because I think that was kind of the fascinating thing. My favorite play of the day was 25 plus points for Victor Wembanyama. He's sitting at like 26.5. You can jam that as well. I think that that's good for Pick'em. I think that's good for a number of places. I'm surprised people are projecting him as low from a scoring potential. He's attempted 12, 16, 13, and 13 threes the last 4 games. They have made a concerted effort to have him shoot against like to the basket centers. Walker Kessler is not going to come out on the perimeter against Victor Wembanyama all that much. He is going to chuck double-digit threes again in this spot, and he has a massive ceiling there over on DK for it. On FanDuel, obviously those stocks, man, it's a ridiculous joke when you have 3.6 blocks per game that you're plugging into your sheet. He's averaging 2.5 steals per game against Utah here, 1.8 on the season, I think is what I had in there. But anyway, Victor Wembanyama just looks ridiculous when you have 5 stocks you're projecting per game.
Yeah, just something that I was thinking about that I think is an interesting talking point of what can end up happening with Wemby's salary. Some news that came in, which is going to be pertinent to the slate, Jalen Green available to play. So we don't have to worry too much about making swaps for the Houston Rockets.
I wanted to get Tom and Thompson.
On Milwaukee Bucks starting lineup and Mike Conley, him being questionable with the toe injury.
Yeah, I really wanted to get Tom and Thompson as like a pivot off of some of the ancillary Milwaukee pieces, but now I'm going to really embrace a lot of the ancillary Milwaukee pieces. I think they're going to look better than Amin Thompson does for 800 more plus. It's going to be an interesting one, man. This is going to be a freaking wild slate.
All right, so we've got a lot coming into the picture now. We've got a lot of the injuries sorted out. So let's do the nuke of the night, Eric. I think it's time for that, and then we'll react to any news that breaks in the final 10 minutes. So, Jordan, play the animation. It's nuke of the night now. There it is. Once again, Eric has been exploded. Eric's been killed on this show more times than Kenny's been killed on South Park, because South Park only runs once per week. We're doing this show, Eric and myself, 5 days per week, and his shit's getting blown up all the time. So something to think about. No person in entertainment has been killed more times than Eric Lindquist. But more importantly, Eric, who's going to kill it for us in our lineups today? Who's your nuke of the night?
All right, so we got to try to get a little bit different because Milwaukee is very, very popular, and I think throwing them out there is a little bit of a fool's errand. And I was going to have Victor Wembanyama be the nuke of the night, but I think most people who have been listening to us multiple years, not just this year, but this year specifically, talking a lot more about how you want to get to some of these spend ups as more value becomes aware to you. But I think that there's still a world where you want to get to tons and tons and tons of this value piece in Gary Trent that might go a little bit under the radar here on the Milwaukee side. So I won't take one of the starting 5 from Milwaukee, but like Gary Trent at 4,100 has shooting guard, small forward eligibility. And if I'm looking to get away from a couple of the chalky popular pieces, I'm looking like single entries, some of these other pieces. I think Corey Kispert at 4,400 is just a bad play. Like if you're going to tell me straight up between one guy off the bench or another guy off the bench, Gary Trent Jr. has been slotted up to 29 minutes now the last 2. He is out there to shoot threes and make threes. And part of what got him off the floor to begin with was he was shooting sub 40% from 3. He has started to figure that out. 4 for 5, 6 for 10, 3 for 5, 4 for 6 from 3 in his last 4. And you know what came with it? Minutes. Minutes came with it. He's getting a lot more opportunity. Chris Middleton also expected to come back here just after Thanksgiving. So like, this might be a spot where you really ramp up his minutes if he has it going. And this is the kind of like tournament winning upside. I'm hoping that he comes off the bench here and that it's just Damian Lillard, Andre Jackson, Taurean Prince, Bobby Portis, and Brook Lopez. And you get a very, very, very low owned Gary Trent off the bench, a way better off the bench piece, I think, than what you're getting in Corey Kispert specifically. So all 1-for-1 swap their ownership. Gary Trent Jr., nuke of the night. Didn't see that one coming.
All right, so I have somebody I am liking. I just ran everything. I've got all my stuff updated here, and there's somebody I really, really like at modest ownership, from the Milwaukee Bucks, Eric. Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez, the last game Giannis didn't play, which it happened one other time this year. Do you remember how many minutes Brook Lopez played in that game?
Like 38?
36 minutes. You got out of Brook Lopez in that game. And he's not the greatest points per minute fantasy producer in the world, but certainly sees a bump in his rates with Giannis off the court. And then you also just have to consider if you can get 36 minutes out of him, and then also he's only projected for around 10% ownership. This is somebody I think is being slept on by the field a little bit, assuming that we could still get those minutes out of Brook Lopez. And we've got him in for 34.5 minutes, which has him for a little bit over 32 fantasy points at 6K. And you think based on his minutes he played the last time Giannis was out, you have the potential for a couple of extra minutes. If you gave him those couple of extra minutes, all of a sudden you're getting Brook Lopez at nearly 35 fantasy points as a projection. I think that this is somebody who the field is sleeping on. I get why the field is going to Damian Lillard. I get why the field is going to Bobby Portis. I'm getting to them a lot too. But Brook Lopez is the one guy I think we could go to on Milwaukee for lower ownership.
I don't mind it. I do say Milwaukee, they could go to some Bobby Portis at the 5 a lot if they wanted to in some of these spots. I don't think they dust off Livingston. I don't think they dust off who's the other guy? Tyler Smith, who is there. But he got ruled out already today, I think, earlier. But I mean, Pat Connaughton, I can't really play the 4. Yeah, Brook Lopez is going to have to be out there against Bam a lot. I mean, if anything were to happen to Brook Lopez, where those minutes are less than 36, 38, you're probably looking at Bam Adebayo completely smashing souls, and that might be an interesting tournament guy to give a little bit of a boost to. My God. I mean, yeah, everybody on Milwaukee just flooding my lineups. I have like 3 in every single lineup, at least. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, I've got my lineups run. I have 100% of Bobby Portis. I've got Damon more than half my lineups. I've got a third of my lineups of Brook Lopez. So yeah, I'm very Bucks heavy as well. But if we're looking for somebody who's, like you said, Eric, we can't just tell people Bobby Portis, Damian Lillard, everybody, we've got a relatively smart DFS audience here. People are familiar with the game. If we told them to play Bobby Portis, we get victory lap at the end of the day. They'd be like, yeah, no shit. We're all playing Bobby Portis. So I'm trying to figure out who's the lowest owned piece in the Bucks lineup that I want the most exposure to. Brook Lopez. That is going to be the guy for me. Super chat here from Rob, and Rob Strum is asking us, Brogdon and Dame, the exact same price as Giddey and Kobe White. Who do we got? I prefer the Brogdon and Dame combination.
Yeah, Brogdon and Dame.
And then Eric Goodwin wants to know Wemby and Collier or Lopez and Vooch on DK.
You will see 0 Collier in my lineups. So Lopez, Vooch by default.
Yep, Lopez, Vooch for myself as well. Let's go into Discord and bang out as many of these questions as we can here, because a bunch of them came in here for us. So let's see. First off, from Hey, I'm Drew. He now wants to know. Parker Boy first asked, when using the Sims tool before you load your lineups, the export manager, you guys allow duplicate lineups? Yes. So it's not going to have it so the same lineup is in the same contest twice, but it lets it so that you could have the same lineup used in different contests. So yes, leave that on. Hey, I'm Drew. DK Cash Game plays for tonight. All right, so updated DK Cash Game plays now that we know Giannis is out. Bobby Portis, Keyshawn George, Damian Lillard, Kyle Kuzma, Wemby. Those are the 5 that I think you absolutely must have for cash.
There you go.
And Whoop-de-Whoop wants to know, is it really a Kuzma and Sar night? To an extent, I like Kuzma quite a bit more than Sar, though.
I like Kuzma a lot more than I like Sar.
And then Mike1377 on FanDuel, which players are boost viable that are low owned? Brook Lopez.
Brook Lopez is definitely viable.
Anybody else you would add to that?
I'm boosting Wemby a little bit because I want even more. I think it looks pretty good to me. I mean, what sucks is I was planning on jamming Amin Thompson. I'm surprised Jalen Green's playing. This kind of sucks. I will say this. J-Val, you don't have to boost all that much. Make sure you have a little J-Val in your life. I mean, this is definitely where you want to go in your life. Like, you want to go. You want to get a little J-Val in your life.
Yeah, Brook Lopez is the main one for me, so that'll be my recommendation there. Supak wants to know Josh Giddey or Austin Reeves on FanDuel. I prefer Giddey.
Yep, prefer Giddey.
JEW, how much Keyshawn George is too much for DraftKings? He's getting a crazy amount. I have him in a little over 70% of lineups.
Yeah,
so
he's
like
in 60% of mine. Yeah, 60, almost 50. I'm like 10% over right now. But again, I am completely off of Corey Kispert for the most part.
Rabashua wants to know, are we dialing back Brogdon exposure? Nah, no need at this point, considering we have a lot of the injury news.
Correct.
Mr. Coolcam, favorite plays at each position for a FanDuel GPP. Somebody left a super chat, so went over that one. Clintonwood 83, who do we need from the first game for cash? Which was, yeah, so from the Chicago-Washington game, the guys who Eric and I said from that spot you absolutely want to have in cash: Kyle Kuzma, Keyshawn George. Sar, I would say also certainly cash viable, but not somebody I think you need to have in cash.
Correct.
Andre Rules 007 here. Any analysis on when Jabari Smith will have a good game? He seems he is a whack-a-mole. He's just a high variance player. Sometimes he's really good. Sometimes he's really shitty. It's kind of good for GPPs when it's like that. For today, though, there's so many good options to get to at forward and at center. I don't have Jabari Smith in my lineups. I've got him in 2 out of 150 lineups.
Yeah, it's just tough to make way there.
Chalupas and Chicken wants to know, who are the must-haves in the
name.
early game and Eric's sneaky GPP play.
Gary Trent is sneaky. He's not popular.
Yeah, I mean, for me, sneaky GPP play overall, that was Brooke Lopez for me again. And then must-haves in the early game, yeah, Keyshawn George, Kyle Kuzma.
Yep, those are the two.
COVID Bryant II wants to know, how many Wizards is too many? Probably more than 3 is too many.
More than 3 is too many, especially now.
M Grizzly wants to know, are we manipulating anything for late news now that Giannis is out, or playing it straight up? Yeah, there's nothing that I'm changing specifically for late news at this point.
Nope, nothing. We got Jalen Green already. I'm playing it pretty darn straight up.
Is that if we're making any kind of adjustments for late news, it would mean foregoing the Wizards or the Bucks, which I'm not willing to do.
Not willing to do it either.
Stokes wants to know, what can we do proactively if Conley is out? You could give yourself a little bit of a boost to Anthony Edwards, but with that said, I don't really like Edwards that much as a pay-up option relative to other guys. Conley's been, he played more minutes the last couple of games, but he hasn't been a massive piece of the Timberwolves offense this year. He's played, over 30 minutes twice all year. He's a lower usage guy. Him being out, it would open up some value, but not anything that's better than what's on the board right now.
No, and the other thing that I'm paying attention to, I mean, I want to get to more Anthony Davis, LeBron James than what I'm currently getting. They're 2 guys that I'm also boosting. And that has everything to just do with, like, I want to get to the highest scoring guys and trying to intermix some of them there. I have nearly 50% Wemby now. I have Anthony Davis in just north of 20%. LeBron James, I'm just forcing to try to get to. He's power forward center. That's the thing that sucks about him, is that you're playing him and it's overlapping with Kyle Kuzma, Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis, and that just becomes a disaster. So I understand why Anthony Davis, if I must get to somebody there, I'm getting to the most of, but I don't know, 5% LeBron, 8% LeBron, that's something that I'm trying to actually make sure that I get.
We got 3 super chats that just came in.
Go.
We only got a couple minutes left to go here. So first, Keys, Eamon Thompson is a cheap contrarian option. He's
Fine.
not that cheap, nor is he that contrarian. He's projected for 20% ownership. So if you wanted to play him for salary savings, he's not all that cheap. If you were hoping he's contrarian, he's not contrarian either. Connor, for DK Cash, Sexton and Gary Trent Jr. or Sar and Champagny. Boy, I don't like either of those combinations for cash. Sar and Champagny, though.
Sar and Champagny, sure. I don't like Champagny at all, though.
Yeah, neither do I. But I don't really want to play Sexton and Trent in cash right now either. Then Jason Kelly, thoughts on Wemby for a DK GPP single entry? You have really strong pay-up option. I have no issues with that at all.
None.
Now, we've also got a couple of questions here that are in Discord. JEW wants to know, by the way,
we got the lineup: Lillard, Green, Jackson Jr., Prince, Lopez. Holy shit. Bobby Portis not starting.
Yeah, so that is something that we will look at the projections and ownership updates when Josh and I are on the playback show. Bobby Portis still looks like a very strong option, but this is certainly going to change some of the value consideration. So we'll see what the ownership projection updates look like when Josh and I get to playback, as well as the projection updates. So yeah, going to be interesting. I'm still going to play a lot of Bobby Portis. I don't think I'm going to have 100% of him anymore, though.
Definitely not.
Still a really good option, but not 100%er for me anymore. JEW wants to know last man in for a DK utility at $4,600. Let's see. 4,600. Kaishan George. If you already have George, then Mike Conley for now, actually.
Yep, Mike Conley's fine.
Parker Boy wants to know, have I tried the starting 5 on DK? I have not. I forget. Is that the one where it's just who scores the most points overall or something like that? No, I haven't really been that interested in it so far. Eric, we are about to approach lock here. Any final thoughts for the people before we get to lock? And then Josh and I are going to be over in playback, updating everybody on what we're going to be doing with swaps for Bobby Portis.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Trent and Bobby Portis coming off the bench is pretty fascinating here, how this is going to pan out. AJ Green, curious what people end up doing with him, because I think Gary Trent's a better player, better play straight up here, regardless of how those minutes pan out. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, Prince is interesting. Jackson Jr., I thought was going to start. Like, that was the guy. I thought the most likely scenario was Dame, Andre Jackson, Torian Prince, Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez. But now AJ Green in there starting. That's not helpful when you're playing next to Damian Lillard. Brook Lopez looks better. I will say that's the main thing that I look at with this. I think Brook Lopez looks better as of now. So hopefully you made some way for him. But yeah, let's jump over to playback. I'm going to be listening as Josh and Greg are breaking stuff down as well. Listening along. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me in the chat. I'll be throwing stuff in for the next half hour, and then I'll move on to tomorrow's slate and work on that for a couple hours. But good Lord Almighty, best of luck to us all.
Jordan's going to drop that link into the YouTube chat. So Jordan, just keep dropping it in and come join Josh and I over on playback. Because of course, just nonsense news that comes out of nowhere. And we're about to break it all down. See you guys over on playback.